She stood at the altar, veil cascading down her back like a silk curtain concealing a secret too heavy for daylight. The ocean behind her whispered against the cliffs, and for a moment, it was as if the world held its breath. The guests watched, entranced, their champagne glasses catching the last golden rays of the Sicilian sun. Flowers lined the aisle, white roses, untouched and pristine, unaware of what they were meant to witness. Cameras flashed. Music swelled. Laughter echoed between the ancient stone columns of the villa. It was a wedding unlike any other. Grand, excessive, flawless. But perfection has a way of cutting too cleanly. There was no visible reason to be afraid. The groom had arrived hours earlier, smiling, greeting everyone like a man certain of his future. His tuxedo tailored to perfection. His shoes polished until they reflected the sky. He kissed his mother. He laughed with his best friend. He held the ring in his pocket like a promise sealed in steel, but the ceremony came and went without anyone noticing what wasn't said. The silence between each vow. The tightness in the bride's jaw as she smiled. The way her eyes moved, calculating, exact, never resting. The pit bulls were there, behind a wrought iron fence near the garden, pacing slowly in the shadows. Most assumed they were for protection. No one questioned why they hadn't been fed all day. Guests partied into the night, drunk on celebration and the illusion of romance. The band played song after song as candles burned lower. But as midnight approached, one man slipped away quietly from the crowd, hand in hand with the woman he had just married. What happened next would horrify a nation. By morning, a scream shattered the calm, high, sharp, and wet with shock. Blood smeared the kennel floor like paint slung by a madman. The villa staff refused to enter the garden. Police arrived to a scene they couldn't fully explain. There was no body. Only scraps. Bone. Clothing. And teeth marks too deep to be from fear alone. There were no witnesses. No cries for help. Just the quiet hunger of dogs, and a story no one would believe until it was far too late. Stay with us. Because over the next 3 hours, you'll hear every detail of what happened on the night a groom walked into his wedding, and never walked out. Subscribe now. Hit the bell. Because this is the story of a marriage built on secrets, and sealed in blood. The wedding invitations described it as an unforgettable evening of elegance and eternal love. Printed on ivory cardstock with gold foil lettering, sealed with a wax crest. Every detail spoke of luxury. Of status. Of control. The event was held at Villa dei Corvi, a secluded estate clinging to the cliffs just outside Palermo, a place once used by noblemen, then later, whispered about in Mafia folklore. August 12, 2022. The sun rose bright and hot, casting a golden hue across the vineyard-laced hills. Guests began arriving as early as 10 a.m. Chauffeured vehicles lined the gravel path. Men in tailored suits. Women in dresses worth more than most annual incomes. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a spectacle. Security at the gate was tight. Armed men, discreetly placed. Facial recognition scanners disguised as vintage cameras. No one entered without clearance, and no one questioned why. The bride had insisted. The ceremony began at 6:42 p.m., precisely. A priest flown in from Florence. A string quartet. White doves released into the dusky sky. To everyone watching, it was a fairy tale, except fairy tales don't end with blood pooled beneath kennel doors. What the guests didn't know, what no one truly understood until it was too late, was that the woman in white had already written the final chapter. Bianca Moretti. Age 29. Heiress. Socialite. A woman of impossible beauty, and even more impossible lineage. Her father, Roberto Moretti, once ruled Palermo's most feared criminal syndicate before being executed in front of his own home. Bianca was 12 years old. That day changed her. She stopped speaking for 7 months. Refused to cry. Refused therapy. Instead, she listened. Watched. Studied. By 17, she had mastered 3 languages. By 19, she was on the boards of multiple charities, fronts, many believed, for laundering family money. She kept her last name, but never her father's associates. She carved her own path, sharper, more modern, and infinitely more ruthless. Those who knew her described her in contrasts. Elegant, yet unreachable. Brilliant, but always calculating. A smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. She did not raise her voice. She didn't have to. Bianca had 2 previous marriages, both ended within a year. One in divorce. The other, tragedy. Her second husband, a venture capitalist from Dubai, was found dead in his penthouse gym. A heart attack, they said. But there were rumors, too many painkillers, a broken jaw, a missing camera feed. The case never went to trial. After that, Bianca disappeared from public life. No interviews. No appearances. No statements. Until Leonardo Vescari, they met at a gallery opening in Milan. He was everything she needed him to be, wealthy, ambitious, eager. But most importantly, naive. He believed in love. She believed in control. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Bianca took over every aspect of the planning. The guest list, the venue, the catering. Even the dog handlers. She imported 4 pit bulls from Russia, pure muscle, unregistered, untrained by standard definitions. She had the kennels built in secret at the far end of the garden, reinforced with custom steel grating. When questioned later, the builders said she wanted a place to keep her wolves. Leonardo never saw the kennels. He didn't ask questions. The night before the wedding, Bianca didn't sleep. She walked the grounds alone, according to staff. Her footsteps echoed across the marble floors like clock hands ticking towards something final. At breakfast, she toasted her guests with espresso. At noon, she had her nails done while reviewing seating charts. At 3, she fired a florist for using lilies instead of roses. At 5, she locked her phone in a drawer and handed the key to her mother. At 6:42 p.m., she walked down the aisle to the sound of strings and gasps, but it wasn't love that brought her there. It wasn't joy. It was precision. The kind that only years of planning can deliver. Stay with us. Because what happens next is the unraveling of a story built on control, vengeance, and the illusion of romance. Leonardo Vescari was a man who believed in beginnings. The son of a prominent surgeon in Naples and a retired opera singer, he was raised in a household of music, ambition, and reverence for the finer things in life. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't dangerous. He preferred subtlety, Italian linen over labels, vintage wine over vodka, poetry over politics. He had charm, but no sharp edges. And that's exactly why Bianca chose him. They met at Galleria Ravelli on a humid spring evening, surrounded by abstract paintings and too much champagne. Leonardo was explaining the symbolism in a piece titled Fall of the Serpent when Bianca interrupted, correcting him with the calm authority of someone who had already read the artist's diary. He laughed. She didn't. He was smitten. She was surveying. To him, it was romance at first sight. To her, it was reconnaissance. They dated publicly for 3 months. Then quietly for 5. During that time, Leonardo changed. Not in a way he noticed, at least not immediately. His phone habits shifted. His friends saw him less. His travel was restricted to cities where Bianca had influence. He sold one of his companies. Told people it was a strategic exit. In truth, he didn't remember signing the final documents. She gifted him a watch for his 32nd birthday. Platinum. Custom engraving. Time only matters when it ends. He laughed. She didn't. Leonardo's family grew concerned. His mother noticed bruises on his wrists. His sister once overheard a phone call, Bianca's voice, low and measured, asking if he had learned the difference between a question and a test. His best man pulled him aside one night after dinner and asked if he was truly happy. Leonardo smiled. He said, "You don't know her like I do," and he was right. No one did. The wedding preparations were relentless. Bianca demanded complete silence from vendors, NDAs from staff, and banned all photography inside the villa until after midnight. She said it was for mystique. But privately, she changed the blueprints of the guesthouse, restructured the security feeds, and had the main pantry converted into a cold storage unit, with no entry from the inside. She told the chef it was for imported fish. She told Leonardo nothing. The night before the wedding, surveillance showed Leonardo pacing in the library, glass of bourbon in hand, speaking into a recorder. The tape has never been found. But what remains is a single line, transcribed by a court stenographer weeks later: "If something happens to me, tell my sister to look in the dog's eyes." Hours later, he was standing at the altar, smiling. The reception was a blur of elegance. Fireworks, live music, a 10-layer cake flown in from Vienna. Bianca didn't drink. She didn't eat. She circulated, smiling just enough, never too long. At one point, she whispered something to the band conductor. Moments later, the music slowed. Guests began to leave. And Leonardo, by now slightly intoxicated, entirely in love, followed his bride through the garden path, away from the lights. There were no cameras past the marble fountain. Only moonlight and gravel. The staff had been dismissed. The pitbulls were waiting. At exactly 12:04 a.m., a scream cut through the night. Then silence. One gardener later testified to hearing something, metal clanging, a dog growl, then the soft thud of something heavy collapsing. He didn't investigate. He assumed it was the wind. When Bianca returned to the main hall, she was alone. Her dress was clean. Her expression calm. She told guests Leonardo had gone for a midnight swim. Some laughed. Others shrugged. The party continued. By morning, he was gone. The investigation was immediate, and yet, strangely ineffective. No blood in the villa. No fingerprints. No signs of struggle. But in the kennel, officers found torn fabric, bone fragments, and a platinum watch. The engraving still visible. Time only matters when it ends. Bianca refused to answer questions. Her legal team arrived within hours. She never cried. She never confessed. The pitbulls were euthanized. No charges were filed. The press dubbed it the wedding of blood, but the truth? The truth was buried beneath designer gowns, polished silver, and the unwavering stare of a woman who never made a single move she hadn't already planned 10 steps ahead. Was it murder? Or was it something even worse? Don't forget to like, comment your theories, and subscribe. Because in this world, some weddings are meant to bind hearts, and others are meant to bury them. 2 days after the wedding, Villa de Corvi stood eerily quiet. The musicians had packed up. The florists were gone. The staff, dismissed indefinitely. Only the local authorities remained, cautiously combing the property under the eye of Bianca's legal team, and a growing wall of silence. Leonardo's absence was now public. Headlines flooded Europe's tabloids. Groom vanishes on wedding night. Heiress bride refuses to speak. Honeymoon or homicide? What made the case more difficult, more maddening, was the lack of a crime scene. No blood. No eyewitness. No body. Only bones. Partial remains recovered inside the kennel, charred, cracked, and consistent with an adult male. DNA tests were inconclusive. They had been boiled. Cleaned. Treated with an acidic compound typically used in industrial meat processing. There was no doubt someone wanted Leonardo erased. And someone knew how to do it. The lead investigator, Inspector Johnny Caruso, had spent over 30 years on the Palermo force. He had seen mob executions, cartel-style disappearances, political murders. But never anything like this. There were no calls for ransom. No known enemies. No motive that made sense, unless you started asking questions about Bianca's past. Caruso began looking into the days leading up to the wedding. The guest list revealed something odd. 3 names stood out. All men. All with ties to the Moretti family. And all dead within the past 5 years. 2 from suspicious heart conditions, 1 from an apparent boating accident. All 3 had also served as legal counsel to Bianca's father. The deeper Caruso dug, the more layers he found. Offshore accounts connected to shell companies in Cyprus. Property deeds in Argentina. A series of encrypted messages sent from Leonardo's phone 2 weeks before the wedding, messages the Vescari family insisted he never wrote. One message read, "I know what she did to Karim Al-Rahim. Bianca's second husband. The one found dead in his gym. A man with a shattered jaw, 3 crushed ribs, and no trace of forced entry. His death had been ruled accidental, until now." Caruso petitioned to reopen that case. He was denied. 3 days later, he was removed from the investigation. No official reason was given. But within 48 hours, he and his wife were on a plane to Prague, their apartment in Palermo vacated, their number disconnected. He has not spoken to press since. With Caruso gone, the case went cold. But one person refused to let it die, Leonardo's younger sister, Valentina. A violinist. Soft-spoken. The kind of woman who blends into the background. But beneath the quiet exterior was a relentless resolve. She had known from the moment she received the call, from the moment Bianca's voice trembled just enough, that her brother was gone. Valentina began her own investigation. She collected statements from dismissed staff. She found deleted security footage. She tracked down the gardener who heard the scream, and paid him to talk, and then she found a journal, locked inside Leonardo's antique trunk, buried beneath books and old letters, was a black leather-bound diary. In it were handwritten pages detailing his final days. His growing paranoia. His isolation. His suspicion that he was being drugged. There were entries about dreams that weren't dreams. Bruises he didn't remember getting. Conversations that disappeared from his phone logs, and then, one final line that if she ever lets the dogs out again, I'm not coming back. Valentina turned everything over to the press. To journalists. To online forums. She begged for someone to listen, and finally, someone did. A retired profiler from Interpol, Alessio Ricci, stepped forward with a theory. Bianca had orchestrated not just a murder, but a ritual. A cleansing. A purge of control. The dogs, he believed, weren't just weapons. They were part of the spectacle. Bianca needed to erase Leonardo completely. Not just from life, but from memory. Ricci's report detailed behavioral patterns, psychological motives, and a timeline that, if proven, would make Bianca one of the most calculating killers in modern European history. The problem? Nothing stuck. Bianca remained untouchable. She continued to deny all allegations. She hosted charity events. Sat front row at fashion shows. Dated briefly, but never remarried. The villa was sold. The kennels demolished, and Leonardo, never found. No death certificate. No trial. No justice, only questions. Why was a man with no criminal ties lured into the orbit of one of the most dangerous families in Sicily? What did he discover? What did he say no to, and what really happened that night, when the music stopped, and the dogs were let loose? If you believe justice still has a voice, leave your thoughts in the comments. If you think there's more to this story, more to uncover, subscribe, because the story isn't over, and somewhere, in the shadows of silence and power, Bianca is still smiling. 3 years passed. 3 long, echoing years. The world moved on. The headlines faded. New scandals eclipsed the old ones. The tabloids chased newer faces, fresher tragedies. But inside a quiet apartment in Venice, Valentina Vescari still sat every night with the same question echoing through her mind: where is my brother? She had done everything within her power. She had filed petitions, contacted foreign agencies, hired private investigators, even published the journal pages anonymously on a true crime blog. Some readers believed her. Most didn't. Conspiracy theorists turned Leonardo into a myth, the groom who ran, they called him. Others claimed he had faked his death to escape Bianca, that he was living in Brazil or Marrakesh or a remote island off the coast of Greece, but Valentina knew better. She had stood in that villa. She had walked the gravel path where he vanished. She had seen the stains on the stones near the kennel, barely visible now, but real. She had read the final journal page 1,000 times, and each time it read more like a will than a warning. Still, without a body, there could be no closure. No charges. No justice. Only shadows. Then came the phone call. A man. Anonymous. His voice distorted. His words slow. I worked for her, he said. I trained the dogs. Valentina froze that he wouldn't give his name. Wouldn't say where he was calling from. But he said he had something Bianca didn't know he kept. A thumb drive. A video. Taken on the night of the wedding. Smuggled from the villa in the pocket of a bloodied uniform. Hidden in the wall of a butcher shop in Catania. He said he was ready to give it up, but only in person. They met 3 days later, in a half-lit alley behind an abandoned church. The man wore a hood. His hands trembled. He didn't look at her. He didn't explain why he was finally speaking. He just handed over the drive and walked away. She never saw him again. What she saw on the drive shattered her. There was no audio. Only grainy footage from a disconnected surveillance camera. The timestamp, 12:02 a.m. Bianca appears first, her dress pristine, her posture rigid. She's walking. Alone. A moment later, Leonardo follows, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, glass still in hand. He calls out something, though his lips move, no sound emerges. She stops. Turns. Says nothing, then the camera shakes slightly. A movement from the left, 2 dark figures. Dogs. Massive. Controlled. Focused. Leonardo steps back. Drops the glass. Raises a hand. Bianca does nothing. The footage ends there. There is no attack shown. No violence captured. But the implication is unmistakable, and suddenly, the truth becomes unbearable. Valentina contacts Ricci. Sends the footage. He confirms its authenticity. Within days, it reaches a documentary producer in Berlin. Then a major streaming platform, The Wedding of Blood, Uncovered premieres 7 months later. It ignites a firestorm. The public is outraged. The footage goes viral. Petitions resurface. Bianca's name trends globally. Former staff from the villa begin to talk. A former housemaid admits to seeing Leonardo restrained weeks before the wedding. A florist reveals a second guest list, one that had only 3 names, all crossed out. A caterer remembers hearing muffled screams coming from the wine cellar the morning after the ceremony. Then, another break. A second drive. Mailed anonymously to the producers. It contains audio this time. A recording. Leonardo's voice, ragged, slurred. She won't let me leave. I think she's rehearsing something. The dogs, they listen to her. She feeds them meat I haven't seen before. Then, silence. Followed by a faint whisper, don't trust her smile. Interpol reopens the investigation. Bianca, now living in Monaco, is subpoenaed. Her legal team delays. Cite stress, privacy, trauma. But pressure mounts. The public demands answers. For the first time, Bianca agrees to a televised interview. She sits in a high-backed chair, in a silk blouse, hair pulled tight. The host asks one question: did you kill your husband? She doesn't blink. No, she says. He chose his fate. The room goes silent. That it's not a denial. It's a declaration, and it changes everything. Interpol places her under surveillance. A new team reviews the villa's blueprints. Excavation begins around the kennel. Beneath the concrete foundation, they find something. Small. Metallic. A ring. Leonardo's wedding band, still engraved, per semper, anche se muoio, forever, even if I die. The trial begins 6 months later. Bianca pleads not guilty. The prosecution presents the footage. The recordings. The journal. The testimonies. They paint a portrait of manipulation, control, psychological torment. They argue that Leonardo was lured, broken, executed, and fed to creatures trained not to bark, only to obey. The defense calls it fiction. A love story gone wrong. A man who vanished by choice. They say there is no body. No DNA. No definitive proof. The jury deliberates for 9 days, the verdict, not guilty. Bianca walks free, the world reacts with fury. Protests erupt. Documentaries flood every platform. True crime podcasts dissect every second. But the law remains unchanged. Without a body, there is no closure. Without justice, there is only memory. Valentina returns to Venice. She lights a candle every night. Keeps Leonardo's journal on her piano. And every time she hears dogs barking in the alley, she freezes, because sometimes, justice doesn't come in courtrooms, sometimes, it hides in the dark, waiting, listening, and sometimes, it wears a wedding dress. That if you believe Leonardo deserves justice, tell us in the comments. If you think this case should be reopened, share this video. And if you're not ready to stop digging, subscribe, because this story may be over, but Bianca's silence still speaks. She stepped out of the courtroom wearing white and no handcuffs. No police escort. No trace of regret. Cameras snapped furiously as Bianca Di Rossi emerged onto the steps of the Italian Supreme Court building, flanked by her legal team. Flashes lit her face like strobe lights, but she didn't flinch. She didn't smile either. She simply walked, slowly, deliberately, past the barricades and toward the waiting black car.no words.no apology. The verdict, not guilty, had landed like a gut punch to the millions who had followed the case with bated breath. In that single moment, everything they thought they knew, everything they had come to believe through the journals, the footage, the testimony, it didn't matter. The law had spoken, and Bianca had won. News anchors struggled to remain neutral. Social media erupted. Protesters gathered outside the villa in Palermo and outside Bianca's new apartment in Monaco. Candlelight vigils were held in Rome, in Paris, even in Toronto, where Leonardo had studied for a semester. Hashtags trended globally. Memes mocked the justice system. Crime experts were invited on every major outlet, dissecting the evidence, or lack thereof. And questioning what kind of justice system could let a woman walk away from a wedding where no groom ever returned. But the truth was cold and brutal. There was no body, there was no murder weapon, there was no recorded death, only fragments. Shadows. Testimony. A bloodied journal. A haunting surveillance video that ended before the violence began, and in the eyes of the law, doubt was enough. Valentina stood just inside the courthouse lobby as the verdict was read. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She only nodded once, so small, so subtle, most missed it. But in that moment, she made a silent vow. This wasn't the end. She returned to Venice a changed woman. She sold the family apartment. Left her teaching job. Declined every interview request. She used the royalties from the streaming documentary to fund her own private investigative foundation. It had one mission, to solve cases where the body was missing, but the truth wasn't. She called it Echoes of the Gone. To this day, she continues to hunt for answers, not just about Leonardo, but about other victims whose voices have been silenced in the same way. In every story, she sees a piece of her brother. And in every shadow, she sees Bianca's eyes. The villa, once a fortress of power and decadence, was abandoned within a year. Locals say no one could live there. The garden died. The pit bulls, transferred to a facility in Austria, refused to eat for weeks. One of them eventually had to be put down. The other remains in a secured location, quiet, unnervingly obedient, responding only to one voice. Bianca's. She has not given another public interview since the trial, but 2 years later, she published a memoir. It was titled Beneath the Veil. Inside, she wrote only one sentence about Leonardo: he loved me until he feared me. It became a bestseller. Tourists now visit Palermo not for the beaches, but to walk the grounds where the wedding took place. Some leave flowers. Some leave notes. One left a replica wedding band on the gravel, etched with the same words as Leonardo's original ring: per semper, anche se muoio. The courts had spoken, but the people. The people had not forgotten, they continued to ask the questions that the trial never answered. Why were there no screams recorded that night? Why did the security footage cut off just before the crucial moment? Why did Bianca dismiss all the household staff 2 days before the wedding? And most hauntingly of all, where is Leonardo Di Rossi? Even now, years later, the question persists like a haunting melody that refuses to fade. Some say justice failed, some say it was never even tried, but in the end, this case didn't just expose a crime that it exposed a truth far more terrifying. Sometimes, evil isn't loud, sometimes, it wears perfume and pearls, sometimes, it walks down the aisle, and never looks back. That if this story moved you, tell us in the comments. Do you believe justice was served? Was Leonardo a victim of love, or of something darker? Share your thoughts, your theories, your questions, and if you believe the truth still matters, subscribe, because Echoes of the Gone isn't done yet, and neither are we.